On a chilly autumn afternoon in the Ichenjil by Bashers, in a city in California, a severe accident occurred. The acrid smell of burning metal and the screech of melting rubber lingered in the thick night air. Amid the wreckage, the remnants of a young life hung on the edge. His name's Daniel. His body was twisted and broken, a cruel testament to the reckless abandon with which he had lived. Blood flowed slowly, steadily from a wound on his head, as if the very life within him hesitated to leave. His once strong arm now hung uselessly at his side, limp and shattered. His thoughts were hazy, flickering on the edge of consciousness. The last thing he heard before darkness swallowed him was the words he had screamed into the void just before the crash. Is this all life is worth? The question echoed in his mind, unanswered, like a challenge hurled at a world that had long abandoned him. In the sterile white corridors of the city's most prestigious hospital, Daniel's life was now a commodity, fought over by the cold, unfeeling machines of medicine at the time. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound, a faint reminder that his broken, battered body was still clinging to life. Outside, in the dimly lit hallway, a man paced anxiously. His silver-streaked hair and impeccably tailored suit revealed a man of wealth and power, but his face, contorted with worry, hinted at something deeper. This was David, a financial magnate whose name was whispered in the corridors of power. He could shake markets with a single phone call, move millions with a snap of his fingers. But now, faced with the prospect of losing his son, all his wealth and influence seemed meaningless, a cruel joke. The things he had spent a lifetime pursuing were now utterly insignificant. The walls, the sterile machines, the quiet beeping, all mocked him, reminding him that some things money could not buy. The operating room door opened with a soft creak. A man in a white coat stepped out, his face as cold as stone. He was the best known as the Golden Hands, a surgeon who could work miracles. But today, even his steady hands had faltered. He looked at David, his eyes carrying the cold professionalism he had shown countless others. "We've done all we can," the doctor said, his voice calm but lacking true comfort. "Your son's injuries are severe. His skull is fractured, his lung punctured, his internal organs irreparably damaged. I'm sorry, but it's a miracle he's held on this long." David stood frozen, a suppressed rage burning within him. He grabbed the doctor's collar, gripping it mercilessly. "This is your job. You're the best, aren't you? I paid for the best, even invested in this top-tier hospital of yours. You don't get to say helpless." "I didn't pay all that money to hear that." The doctor extricated himself, adjusting his glasses with a calmness that bordered on cruelty. "I understand your pain, but this is the reality. No one can save him." Despair crashed over David like a tidal wave, suffocating him. His strength left him, and he collapsed into a chair, his body trembling. His mind reeled, as if he could buy his son's life back, pull him from the brink with money and power. But no matter how many calls he made, how many connections he leveraged, the answer was always the same: refusal. Polite but meaningless words. The cold truth was that no one, not a single soul in this world, could save his son. Then his assistant, hesitant and trembling, approached. "Mr. David," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid someone might overhear. There's someone. A rumor, sir. A doctor. They call him Shu. He has no license, but they say he's a genius. An underground surgeon capable of performing impossible operations." The words hung in the air like a fragile thread, a faint glimmer of hope against crushing despair. David's heart pounded. "Where do I find him?" The assistant hesitated. "It's not that simple, sir. There's a price, and it's steep." David, desperate and willing to do anything, didn't care about the cost. "Where?" "I'll pay anything. Just tell me." The assistant nodded quickly, his voice barely above a whisper. "He lives on the outskirts of the city, a small villa, remote. And so, with nothing but the hope of a desperate father, David set out to the edge of the world where the road ended and the darkness began. The villa stood alone, perched on the edge of a forest, its surrounding trees like sentinels, guarding its secrets. The distant sound of wind whispering through the leaves was the only noise, a sound so faint it nearly blended into the earth. The villa bore no sign, no indication that it was anything but a forgotten place. Its isolation was absolute, yet there was a strange, unshakable feeling that something profound resided within its walls. David stood at the gate, the weight of his body pressing against the doorbell. His heart pounded, each beat echoing in his ears. A sense of unease gnawed at him, but he had no other choice. He had crossed a line, leaving behind the world he once dominated with ease. Now, standing before this mysterious, enigmatic figure, he could only hope this final step would save his son. The door opened slowly, revealing a dimly lit living room. The only light came from a yellowed table lamp, casting long shadows on the walls. Sitting in a worn, tattered armchair was the man called Shu. His face was striking, one side scarred, the other flawless. A black cloak draped loosely around him, the fabric rustling in the silence like a whisper. He looked more like a statue than a man, motionless, indifferent to the world. For a long moment, David stood there, waiting for Shu to speak. The air was heavy, thick with something he couldn't name. But when Shu's icy eyes finally locked onto him, it was as if a door had opened, revealing a world of darkness behind. "Are you Shu?" David asked, his voice hoarse but striving to maintain the control and strength he once wielded so easily. Shu didn't answer immediately. He merely nodded, his gaze never leaving David's face. There was no warmth in those eyes, only a coldness that seemed to seep into the surrounding air. It was a look that made David's skin crawl, but he couldn't look away. "My son," David said, stepping forward, his voice breaking with desperation, He's dying. The doctors, they've given up. I heard you can save him." For a moment, Shu didn't move, his silence deepening the weight of the words. Then, slowly, he rose from the chair, each movement deliberate, almost calculated. He didn't speak, but walked to the window, staring into the darkness as if weighing something far beyond the villa's walls. "How much?" David asked, his voice low, almost pleading. "I'll pay anything," Shu responded without hesitation. $30 million, he said, his voice flat, almost indifferent. David felt the words like a slap to the face. 30 million. The number seemed unreal, even to him. It was far beyond what he had ever imagined paying for anything, but for his son, his only son, it was a price he would pay without hesitation. "You're insane," David said, his voice thick with disbelief. 30 million? Do you know what you're asking?" Shu's cold gaze didn't waver. He pointed to the door. "If you don't have the money, your son will die, just as the doctors told you." The choice was simple, and in that moment, David's pride, wealth, and power, all of it dissolved into nothingness. What was his success worth if he couldn't save his son? With gritted teeth, he made his decision. "Fine," he said, his voice a low growl. "I'll pay." The next morning, in the sterile cold of the hospital doctor, Shu examined Daniel's wounded body. His fingers moved with the precision of a machine, tracing the injuries with careful, detached motions. When he spoke, it was as if the weight of his words carried a gravity greater than any sum of money. "I can save him," Shu said, his voice soft but certain. "But I'll need replacement organs for the parts of his body that cannot be repaired." David stared at him, the idea of using another person's organs sending a shiver through him. But what else was there? His son was dying, and this man, this strange figure who seemed to exist beyond life and death, was his only hope. "What do you mean?" David asked, his voice tense with unease. "To save him, someone else must replace their body parts," Shu said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at Daniel's body. "Your son's body cannot be repaired. but with another's organs, I can bring him back. In the quiet of a small bakery the next morning, Tommy, the baker, worked as usual, his hands moving deftly, kneading dough. His world was simple, a life built on bread and the gentle rhythm of his small shop. But that morning, his life was about to change forever. 3 police officers entered the bakery, their faces stern and weathered. They approached Tommy, and the lead officer spoke, his voice rough and accusatory. "Are you Tommy?" the officer asked, his eyes scanning the room, as if looking for something more than bread. Tommy nodded, unsure of the visit's purpose. "Yes, that's me." The officer's next words were as cold as the steel in his eyes. "Were you at the scene of the car accident involving Mr. David's son?" Tommy's face twisted in confusion. "What?" "No, I didn't witness anything." The officer's gaze hardened. "You were there, weren't you? You caused the accident. You crossed the street without looking, and that's why the driver lost control." Tommy's confusion turned to frustration. "That's not true. I saw the car speeding. It wasn't my fault. The driver couldn't control it." The officers didn't listen. "Shut up," one growled, his hand already reaching for Tommy. "You're coming with us." Although Tommy protested, he was gently handcuffed and led out of the bakery, the door closing behind him with a sense of finality that left his mother in shock, her eyes filling with tears. She could only watch as her son was taken away, unable to do anything but stand there. In the car, Tommy's voice broke the silence. "Don't worry, Mom, it'll be fine. They'll let me go. I'll be back soon." But she could only watch as her son was driven away, her heart breaking with each passing moment. She had no idea that her son's fate had already been sealed, manipulated by forces far beyond her understanding or reach. At the police station, after a call from his subordinate, the chief turned to David. "We've got the baker, just as you requested," the officer said. On the other end of the line, David's voice was cold. "Good. Convict him. Hold the trial immediately. Bribe the judge, the witnesses. Do whatever is necessary to secure a legal death sentence for him. Understood?" The trial unfolded swiftly, like a cruel mockery of justice. The courtroom, with its high ceiling and polished marble floor, was like an arena where lives were bought and sold with the stroke of a pen. The judge, a man with eyes seemingly clouded by indifference, delivered the verdict with practiced ease. Tommy, the baker, stood at the precipice, the weight of the accusations pressing down on him from all sides. His eyes scanned the room, trying to comprehend what was happening. His heart pounded, a wild rhythm out of place in the cold, sterile atmosphere of the court. He had no chance to speak. The evidence against him was fabricated, the witnesses coerced and bribed. And when the gavel struck, it wasn't just the end of the trial that stunned Tommy. It was the realization that his fate had been decided before he ever had a chance to defend himself. His world, a simple life of flour, dough, and the gentle warmth of the bakery, shattered in an instant. He was nothing more than a pawn in a game he didn't understand, a life sacrificed for the price of another. Outside the courtroom, David stood with quiet satisfaction. The verdict was secured. The baker would die, and in his death Daniel would live. Dr. Shu, standing beside him, remained silent throughout, his eyes cold and calculating, never leaving the trial. This man was always an enigma, his motives inscrutable, his actions incomprehensible. But now, standing next to David, he was like a shadow, detached from the drama unfolding, as if none of it mattered. After the trial, Sheyu spoke with a calmness that felt almost out of place. "The surgery will take place soon. I'll need the parts from the baker, and I'll ensure your son survives." David nodded, the weight of the price he had paid pressing down on him like a boulder. "Just do it. I want my son to live." And so Tommy was transferred to a cell where he awaited death. He had no idea that his body would soon be dissected, his organs taken to save a life that meant nothing to him. The world he once knew, the simple comforts of the bakery, now felt like a distant memory. All that remained was the cold cell, the darkness of the unknown closing in from all sides. In the prison, he had one final meeting with his mother. Her face was etched with pain, her eyes red from crying. She had no words, only the silent weight of a mother who had lost everything. She reached out, her trembling fingers touching his cheek. "No, Mom," Tommy whispered, his voice hoarse. "I won't give up. I'll get through this. I'll come back, I promise." But his mother knew deep down that no promise would be kept. Her son had been sentenced to death by forces beyond her control. She held him for one more moment, as if hoping to hold on to something, anything, to keep him with her. As she left, the prison door slammed shut with a resounding clang, and Tommy was left alone, the cold of the cell seeping into his bones. Soon after, Dr. Shu appeared, accompanied by the corrupt officer David had paid to ensure the trial went as planned. Shu's voice was as cold as ever. "Today you will die, but a part of you will live on. Your organs will save Daniel, Mr. David's son." Tommy's eyes narrowed. He felt fear rising in his chest, but he refused to let it consume him. "Do what you must. I have no choice," the officer smirked, a twisted smile full of satisfaction and power. He signaled to his subordinates, who restrained Tommy as Shu prepared the anesthetic. The last thing Tommy saw before darkness took him was the cold, detached face of the doctor and the cruel indifference in the officer's eyes. As the anesthetic took hold, Tommy's final thoughts were of his mother. He wondered if she would remember him as he once was, a simple baker with dreams of a peaceful life. He wondered if, in her grief, she would find solace in thinking he had done the right thing. But as darkness consumed him, he knew none of it mattered anymore. His life, his body, had been traded for another's. In the operating room, preparations were frantically completed, the air taut with tension. The nurses and assisting doctors of the hospital watched Dr. Shu as he entered, their eyes filled with skepticism and fear. He followed none of the standard procedures they knew. Outside the operating room, David watched Shu and exclaimed, "Finally, my Daniel is about to be saved." Shu said, "One thing in our contract, Mr. David. I will save your son, but I bear no responsibility for what happens after he is healthy again." "Fine. If he fully recovers, I'll have no complaints," David replied decisively. "Good. Then everyone wait outside. I'll perform the surgery alone, no assistance needed, Doctor." Shu stepped into the operating room and began his work. As Shu picked up the scalpel, the world seemed to pause. His slender fingers moved with a speed and precision that felt unreal. His hands danced, the scalpel gliding through flesh with an eerie calm. Not a single movement was wasted. His incisions were flawless, his stitches perfect, like a work of art. He didn't seem like a doctor, but a master artist completing another masterpiece. His mind, fully focused on the task, paid no heed to the lives he was taking or saving. To him it was all the same, a necessary problem, a simple equation. Some lives needed saving, others had to be sacrificed. That was all. Outside the operating room, David paced anxiously, his eyes constantly checking the clock. Time, to him, had always been something to control, manipulate, and bend to his will. But now, with his son's life at stake, time slipped through his fingers like sand. Hours passed, each minute an eternity. 10 hours felt like a century, but still, no sign of Shu emerging. 3 more turns of the clock's hour hand, and Shu finally stepped out of the operating room. David rushed forward, his voice filled with fervent hope. "How is he? How's my son?" Shu's face remained impassive, his eyes dark and unreadable. "The surgery was successful. The bandages will be removed in 3 months." David's relief was palpable, but a nagging thought lingered in his mind. "What about Tommy?" he asked, his voice hesitant, unsure if he wanted the answer. Shu's gaze hardened, and he looked at David with a coldness that made him shudder. I used most of his organs and limbs. He's no longer human, just a pile of flesh. Would you like to see? David recoiled, his face twisting in disgust. That's enough. 3 months later, Shu removed the final bandages from Daniel's face. The transformation was complete. His son, or what remained of him, stood before him. A new life born from another's body. David embraced his son, tears streaming as he whispered, Thank you, doctor." Shu nodded, his work done. "My part is finished," he said, turning away. "I have nothing more to do with you." But as David stood there, looking at the shell of his son, something gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't shake. His son was alive, but at what cost? The next morning, David received news that shattered the fragile peace he had fought to restore. "Sir, your son has disappeared." David's heart sank. "That useless boy. When he's stronger, he'll see what happens." But Daniel, or what he had become, had made his choice. Daniel, or Tommy as he once was, awoke in a new skin. His body, once familiar and full of life, was now a borrowed vessel. He stood before a mirror, staring at a face that wasn't his, the face of the one who had caused so much suffering. The features were Daniel David's, but the eyes, those were Tommy's. The haunted eyes that had once seen the bakery, the flour, the dough, everything he'd ever known, were now trapped in a body he could never call his own. The confusion was overwhelming. The man he had been, the simple baker whose life revolved around the warmth of the oven and the rhythm of kneading dough, was gone. In its place was someone else. Someone who, despite carrying all his memories, didn't belong here. He reached out, touching the smooth skin of his new face, feeling the strangeness of it all. What had been done to him? What price had he paid? For a fleeting moment, he wondered if it was all a dream. Perhaps he was still in that cold, dark cell, flickering between consciousness. Perhaps this body, this new identity, would dissolve when he opened his eyes again. But the reflection in the mirror didn't fade. It remained, staring back at him with eyes he no longer recognized. Daniel's father, who had paid for this horrific transformation, had abandoned everything. He had his son back, his son in a way, but not truly. What David didn't understand, didn't see, was that a soul, the essence of a person, couldn't simply be transplanted. It couldn't be bought, no matter how much money was spent. Daniel was no longer the young man he once knew. He was a stranger, lost in a world that would never be his. But Tommy knew the truth. Though the body that moved, breathed, and lived wasn't his, the soul inside was. And he remembered everything. The pain of being abandoned by the world, the grief of a mother who lost her son, the quiet of the bakery, the softness of dough beneath his hands. The world he had known and lost now seemed distant, like a dream slipping away with each passing second. But Tommy, or Daniel, depending on the name he chose to carry, had to return to that world. It was the only thing left to him. His first steps out of the hospital were hesitant. The world stretched out before him, alien and cold. It was as if he were walking through someone else's life, a life imposed on him, like an ill-fitting coat covering the wounds beneath. His first destination was the place he once knew. The bakery. He had to go there. It was the only place that still felt like home, the only place where he could find meaning in the chaos of his mind. When he arrived, the smell of fresh bread still lingered in the air, but now it was tinged with something darker. The light was dim, the kitchen silent. Tommy's mother was there, alone, her eyes hollow with the grief that had consumed her. When she turned and saw him, the air between them grew heavy, and for a moment time seemed to stop. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. She stepped back, as if seeing a ghost. You're not him. You're not my son, Tommy." Or Daniel stood at the threshold, his new face a mask of pain. "Mom, it's me," he said, his voice hoarse, the words foreign on his tongue. "I'm Tommy. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm here. I'm still me." The woman stared at him, her face contorted with disbelief. No, my son is dead. You're the one who killed him. You're the reason he's gone. Her words hit like a punch to the gut, and for a moment he staggered, as if the weight of her accusation could bring him to his knees. But then something shifted. The pain, the anger, the confusion, they merged into a raw, primal emotion surging within him. He had no right to ask for her forgiveness, but he had to explain, he had to make her understand. I didn't do it. I didn't kill Tommy, he said, his voice trembling with raw truth. Tommy is dead, but it's not my fault. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of it. His mother's eyes softened for a moment, as if reality began to settle in. She reached out, her trembling fingers touching his cheek, as if testing the unfamiliar skin, the face of her son no longer there. She looked at him, her eyes searching for any trace of the boy she once knew. The silence stretched on like an eternity. Then, slowly she spoke, her voice barely audible. "So, what happened to you? And why do you look like him, Tommy?" No, Daniel didn't know how to answer. There were no words to explain, no way to clarify the madness that had brought him here. All he knew was that he was alive, he was breathing, and that was what he had to hold on to. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I wish I could change it. I wish I could bring him back. But I can't. I can't bring Tommy back. I can only be here. I can only try to do what's right." The price of life was steep, and Tommy knew he had paid it in full. His body was no longer his identity shattered. But in the end, it didn't matter. The woman, the boy, the man, the soldier, whoever knew their worth, didn't chase money, fame, or choices. He lived because he had to, not because someone told him to. And so Tommy Daniel, whatever he had become, walked away knowing there was no going back. The world he once knew was gone, replaced by something new. But even in the face of loss, even with everything taken from him, he found something. A spark of freedom, a chance to be reborn in his own way, and that, he realized, was the true price of life. Tommy's voice lowered, filled with determination but tinged with anxiety. "Mom, even if my face has changed, I'm still your son. We have to escape, go somewhere far away. Daniel's father, he's still hunting me." With that, Tommy quietly handed her a stack of money, placing it in her hands. It was the money doctor Shu had given him, enough for the two of them to start a new life, far from the shadow of the past. Their eyes met, wordless but filled with trust and hope. That very night, under the dim glow of the moon, Tommy and his mother quietly left. In their hearts, a deep gratitude for Dr. Shu, the man they once thought was a terrifying shadow, a demon with a cold scalpel. But now, to them, he was nothing less than an angel sent from heaven to save them from the brink of life and death. Dr. Shu, a mysterious figure, an enigma whose true name remained hidden in the darkness. All that was known was that he was of African descent, and everything else about him was shrouded in mystery. But one truth was undeniable. Shu was a surgical genius. In the medical world, he was whispered about as a god, with hands capable of turning the impossible into reality. And today, somewhere out there, that mysterious doctor still wielded his scalpel, performing miracles only he could achieve. I hope this story has left you reflecting on the true cost of existence, beyond money, power, or even the choices we make. Tommy's journey, trapped in Daniel's body, forces us to question what makes us who we are. Is it our face, our memories, or the spark of our soul that refuses to fade? This tale of sacrifice, desperation, and rebirth reminds us that life's value isn't measured in wealth or status, but in the quiet moments of connection, resilience, and hope. Dr. Shu, the enigmatic surgeon, stands as a symbol of both destruction and salvation, showing us that even in the darkest corners, miracles can emerge. Thank you for watching this story on Shu Stories. If it moved you, taught you something, or made you rethink what silence can mean, hit that like button, Subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments below, where are you watching from? Your voice matters. Let it be heard quietly or boldly. And don't go anywhere. Click on one of the videos now appearing on your screen for more powerful stories of dignity, justice, and I expect we'll see you in the next.